welcome everyone. My name is Jamie Crockett. I have Bree Michelle with me. Say hi, Bree.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We had a few hiccups earlier on Facebook Live, but we wanted to make sure that you all had the opportunity to really hear us and have a full experience. So I'm excited to be back. And I thank Jamie for being back and being such a gracious host
Oh,
and doing this for me. So, hey, y'all.
no problem, no problem. And for those who may not know you or know you as well as they will once they read your memoir,
Okay.
we're going to just read a little bit more of Bree's bio. So I'm going to start off with Bree is a lifestyle blogger. She goes by Bree Michelle and is the founder and CEO of Fruitful Poetic Lights. She was born and raised in East St. Louis, Illinois, and now is based in Northern Virginia. She has successfully navigated through childhood poverty, abuse, and addiction. And she believes that part of her life's purpose is to train and build a bridge to close the gap created by the digital divide for people living in high poverty areas. She has a proven track record of doing this in her work for the last 7 years of her professional career. She is a well-educated Black woman, completing an Associate of Science in Biblical Studies, 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees in English and Psychology, and a Master in Science in Library and Information Science, all before the tender age of 30. When's your birthday, Bree?
Oh my gosh, girl, look, I'll be 30 in December at the end of this year. I am super excited about it. You know, I'm not one of those people who are like really dreading being 30. So I'm excited. So yeah, I'll be 30 this year, y'all. Even though we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm a 90 baby. 90s baby, stand up.
It's beautiful. And guess what? Bree is also, if you didn't know, a licensed minister and has served in ministry since she was 10 years old. So 2 decades, guys. She is currently an active participant in her local home church. And Bree has always known that God has had a strategic plan for her life, despite her many efforts, come on sis, we've been here, to stray away from the pool of the Holy Spirit. She believes that Christianity is not a religion, but a lifestyle that you have to choose to be an active participant in daily. And in her podcast with the same name, Confessions of a Young Adult's Life, she says that the things that we're all thinking, but we're too afraid to voice out loud. So everyone, again, welcome Bree Michelle. Hey, Bree.
Hey, woo! Yay! I am so excited, Brandy. Oh my gosh! Oh, we will not do this today. We won't have these mixed up demons. Child, look, I get it honest. It's a family thing. My grandmother would call us she's like, you better answer. You know who I'm talking to. So look, Jamie, I'm so excited to actually be here and to have this moment and to just really just deep dive and discuss because, girl, when I tell you, yes, it is just a beautiful thing to be able to take this process, this blog process, because it started off, Confessions of a Young Adult's Life kind of started off as a blog a little bit. But I'm excited to have this moment to really share it with you, to share it with another East St. Louis native. As we told them earlier, the people who were able to join our live on Facebook earlier, hopefully they heard us. But this is, I believe, the beginning of a beautiful partnership. And we're going to have a few more things for you all. And this is going to work for us. And I think it's going to go well. And I'm super excited about what we're about to talk about and what we're about to do right now in this space. And Jamie, would you like to pray or would you like me to pray? Because I think that it's more fitting even now, right now, while we have this moment, this intimate time to really just kind of like open up again with a word of prayer. I know we prayed with each other earlier, but we can do it again. If you want to be, if you feel so led.
You should get us started, Bree. Minister.
Okay.
Minister.
Girl, look. Okay. All right. Yeah. I am a minister, and it is. We'll talk about that. How I got to that. How we got to that revelation. But I do this on my podcast often, so I think it's so fitting for us to have this moment to actually share it on this book talk. So I want to share that with you all. So Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for being in the midst with us. Although we had all of those hiccups and hang-ups, technical difficulties earlier that the enemy tried to set up, but it did not stop our stride. It did not stop our progress. And so I thank you that in this moment, in this time where we get to have another opportunity, we thank you for one, being the God of second chances. But I thank you for another opportunity to be able to record and to be able in this moment of time to make history once again together and to just have an intimate discussion and conversation that I believe that even on the rebroadcast, people will get something out of it and they will hear something that will help to enlighten them, help to get to know you more intimately. Not just to, be curious about what's going on with my relationship with you, but also to be curious enough to develop a relationship with you on their own. And so I just pray that, you give Jamie the right words to say, the wisdom or whatever it is that she has on her heart to act. And I thank you that you give me the knowledge and understanding to be able to answer in a way that will be not only beneficial to myself, not only beneficial to me and Jamie, but beneficial to those who are listening. And so we just ask for those things. We ask you, Holy Spirit, to be in the midst of us as we take this time to have this moment. And it's in your Son, Jesus' precious mighty name. We thank you. Amen.
Amen. Amen, sis.
Amen, sis. Amen. Look, we had a day today, okay? But it's been a great day with each other.
And I'm glad that you mentioned like the circumstances because first and foremost, we do want to acknowledge that people are going through in just normal life, but just I guess reflecting and even while we're in it on what it is to live as a young adult in the pandemic and COVID-19 times, the time of coronavirus, I have to say. And so let's start off there. How have you been coping as a young adult? Remote working, things like that. How have you been able to pivot? And if you have any words for those who are going through whatever they may be going through at this time.
Absolutely. This whole thing is a pivot. This entire thing, like even today was a pivot. Like not allowing myself, you realize you reach a certain level of growth when you don't allow yourself to just handle things the way that you used to. Because this could have completely derailed me today because of what was going on. It didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. It didn't work out. But being able to pivot, especially in 2020 has been the year of the pivot. And I believe that in this time and in this moment, having the ability to just pivot. And I think God wanted us to have a second opportunity to do this because I feel like that there may be more that we need to discuss that didn't necessarily get put out there earlier, although, it was a great discussion and I appreciate everyone who there with us. But I really feel that in this moment, in this really intimate moment, and when we prepare to do the rebroadcast of this, that I think people will get even better understanding and a deeper knowledge and a more intimate moment. And I'm so excited about it. But COVID-19 and coping for me this year, I will be honest with you when I say when we first went into the stay-at-home order, I did not cope well. That first week to 2 weeks, I was like, what we doing? Like, no, this ain't it for me. I do not want to say, and I am someone who is a stay-at-home person. I am a homebody in every every sense of the word. I choose to be at home. But when I have to actually just physically be there because I ain't got no choice, the rebellious spirit on the inside of me rises up in such a way, which is what you're finding out while we're dealing with this so much in why our numbers are so high right now in the United States is because that spirit of rebellion that we have on the inside of us, it rises up. And a lot of us give into that instead of us taking the time to actually have a moment and to think like, maybe you should do something that's better for your safety and stuff. Because I had a couple of those moments. But the reason why I had a couple of those moments is because I don't think a lot of people understood that even before COVID-19, I was already dealing with isolation. And I was already dealing with it at such a high degree of isolation. And so for me to go from already being in a very high, strong period of isolation to now actually physically being shut down completely, it rocked my world in a way that I really did not expect. And it kind of like hurt me a little bit. And so for me, I was coping badly. And then kind of as we got into the middle of it, I started to kind of find my groove and started to kind of ride the wave, and I adjusted myself. And because I'm more of I call myself an introverted extrovert. It was easy to kind of like take my already life and to kind of like be able to maneuver it, because I am a big believer of trying to keep work life separate from my private life. And so when my work life and my private life came and collided, it caused like a whole lot of chaos. And COVID is really trash and Corona is really trash because there are a lot of life events that happened during this time that, I struggled through. I recently lost in April, one of my best friends passed away. And then his birthday was the next month, and he would have been 30 years old. And even right now in the month of August, we're literally celebrating basically the 5th anniversary of another one of my friends, and she passed away maybe a week or so before her birthday, and she would have been 30 this month as well. So it has been kind of rough to be able to navigate through these things, and then especially being kind of far away from my family, because I'm centrally based in Virginia, in Northern Virginia. So I kind of live away from my family, like about 13 hours away from my actual immediate family. And so I've really been kind of like trying to power through. So in the month of June, I actually was able to come home for about 2 weeks to kind of like recenter and refocus. I'm currently at home right now while we're having this meeting. And so I just have been very intentional about reaching out during this time, been very intentional about doing things that are beneficial to my life and that are self-seeking in a way that are feeding me and helping me to realize that I'm not alone. So I've been fighting hard not to isolate myself and, just really be open to, people caring about me and letting people love me during COVID and during 2020 right now.
Wow, that's a word. Have you found yourself like reaching out to people that you haven't talked with in a long time because you had a little extra, I guess, more flexibility or at least more opportunity to connect with people now?
A little bit. I will say that I've had more surprises where people have actually reached out to me more. And it was so many beautiful surprises. Like one of my friends, and her name is Shar, and I'm sure she'll be okay with me, saying her name. But she reached out to me, and it was such a beautiful, pleasant surprise because you don't realize how busy you've gotten until, the world kind of stops and you're like, oh, well, I've just been kind of like being robotic about my life and just been moving on like a little robot. And then when everything kind of like stops, you're like, oh, well, now I kind of have more, but I feel like in a way I've been more busy now than I was prior. And it's like I'm making more time though to be intentional about relationship building and being relational intelligence is what Dr. Darius calls it. So I'm being more intentional now than I think ever about like building relationship and being more open to even having relationships, which is growth. It's a growth for me because I've never really been a person that was like big on relationship until like I think this year is when I really realized like, oh, Britt, you need to be more intentional about cultivating good, healthy relationships in your life. And so it's been very beneficial. So I think, although COVID did come to kill, steal, and destroy, being able to have this stop and this moment, this pause, and this interruption has actually been a beautiful thing for my life in this time.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. And again, we both wish that and pray that your families are doing okay during this.
Absolutely, you are.
Something that we have never experienced in our lifetimes, and it's something else. And so we're with you. We're praying with you. We're loving on you, and we know that God is moving and will move on your and our behalves. And so thank you for sharing what that has looked like for you, Bree. And
yes.
I want to go back a little bit because you kind of dropped this on us, which is, I'm glad that you did. You had been blogging for quite some time about confessions of a young adult's life. And so I remember you talking in a podcast episode about it started on like a Google blog, or I think it was Blogger or Blogspot or something. So
Yeah.
how long ago was that? And why did you decide to start the blog?
So the title or the process of Confessions of a Young Adult's Life, I would say that it's been really like a 7-year journey for me. It really started like the year after I graduated from undergrad. And it was during a time where I kind of just didn't know what to do. I wanted to, so I want to say, yeah, I didn't know what I was wanted to do, but also I want to say that I wanted to get myself back into the groove of writing. And because I've always known that I've always wanted to write a book. And so I wanted to get myself back into the groove of intentionally writing. And so what I decided to do, which also ended up being therapy for me in that time with me not realizing, is I decided to take 1 year of my life and write for every day that year. So for 300 and I think the year that I started might have actually been like a leap year or something, but I know for at least 365 days in a year, I wrote every day. And for some reason, I know a lot of people was probably like, that is so strange for you to want to write. Like, okay, most people personally journal and they hold that stuff into themselves and they don't share it. I don't know what possessed me to want to start an online space where I tell my business to the world. And I mean, literally, because I had people in all over the world that would kind of like, because you see the stats and stuff that were reading my blog. And it started on, Blogger and Blogspot are pretty much basically synonymous. So it was together. I think they meshed together at some point and then it became like Blogspot or Blog or whatever. And so I started on Google, and Confessions of a Young Adult's Life was born. And it was right after undergrad, and it was right when I was still dealing with a lot of feelings, and writing has always been very cathartic for me because I've been really writing since I was 9. I remember the first story I ever wrote. It was a short story. It was a mystery, and it was about a baker and his missing bread. I can't remember the actual name, but I started really young. And but this 7-year period, so the blog lasted consistently for a year. Then every now and then I would go on and I would do some updates throughout the years, and then I just stopped for a period of time. And so then it was around maybe 2 years ago when I was like, okay, I need to do something. I need to do something again. And I was going through a really rough patch, and I was having a difficult time transitioning from, being always around my family all the time. So now going to a place where I was going to be an adult, and I had to adult and do adult things. And I was having a difficult time transitioning into that form of adulthood because I was already an adult. I was well into my 20s. I was about 28 years old, 27, 28 years old when I moved to Virginia. But I had never really fully experienced where I was literally uprooting my life in a way that wasn't going to be temporary in many ways, even though the job that I had was kind of temporary, but it was intentionally knowing that I was leaving to go to a permanent place that I was planning on kind of like living the rest of my life out of. And so I had a really difficult time transitioning that year. And so in the midst of that, God was like, write the book. And I was dealing with so many different things. Like 2018 was such a very traumatic mental health year for me. And a lot of that time I kind of suffered in silence a little bit, but it was just like, write the book. And so I started the book in like November. And from November, it became a 2-year process. So Confessions of a Young Adult's Life, yes, it actually, it went from being a blog to being a book to now being a podcast. So it's constantly elevating as I go. And so right now it's a podcast and a book that's out there, a memoir that's about my life. And so one day those blog posts that I posted before, they'll be available again for people to read and see. I'm figuring that out now because I want people to be able to see the growth. So it's really been a 7-year process of navigating through, and I think on that one podcast, I made it clear that somebody else was kind of low key starting to use my name. And I was like, I see you. but you just know that I started this first. I have the copyright to prove it. And so I wasn't concerned about it. But yeah, so that's kind of how it was birthed. It was birthed out of a place where I was trying to find an outlet for myself to really start healing and to just map out the healing process of dealing with all of these different bottled up emotions and feelings that I was having. And then allowing other people to kind of share in that moment with me. And I got a lot of viewers. So thank you to everybody who was following that blog at that time. I really appreciate you all for just, following me. I was just a young girl just trying to, work her way through life and get free therapy, because that was my therapy at the time.
That's good. That's good. And we've talked before about where my mind went when I heard the title, and then when we started talking about it more one-on-one. And I'll share with the audience who's listening in. And my mind went straight to Usher's "These Are My Confessions," like that whole interlude, like running over in my head. And as millennials, we talk about our business openly. Oh, no. And I think some of our young adult, more seasoned group generation, if I can call them, because you're as young as you feel and young as
that's you what I call them. I call them mature young adults.
Mature young adults. And so they might just not understand. I've had conversations with some people who are just like, why are you talking about this aspect of your life in public?
Yes. Why are you telling all your business? Yes, I agree with you, Jamie.
It's important for us, and I don't want to speak for every millennial, because there are some who are extremely private and some who have worked through whatever they need to work through to share their story. And so not saying it's bad to keep your privacy or anything like that, but we do find many of us are like, I'm just going to tell it. I'm going to tell it all. I'm going to tell it on the mountain. I'm going to tell it in the valley. And I think that we can speak for ourselves and say that there is purpose behind us sharing our story, because we know that our personal testimonies go beyond us. And that hopefully and prayerfully that they impact other people. So my question to you is, when you were writing, were you specifically writing, and when you record your podcast, is your target audience truly just the young adults who are actually in our age range? And I think you even mentioned the age range that you hope to target in one of your podcasts, but can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Who you had?
Yes, actually I can. It's strange to say that because we are, the core audience, my core audience, actually, I found out my core audience is between the ages of 28 to 34. So it's around my age group, or a little bit older than me, or right at my age group. However, Fruitful Poetic Life's vision is to reach audiences from like teenage age, so 13 to 45 plus. It's funny that you asked this question and asked it in the way that you did, because I grew up around a lot of the older generation. Baby boomers were very much so influential in my life. And then, of course, my father and my mother, they come from, I think, Generation Z. And then you have, Generation X is, I never keep up with it so well. And then you have Generation Z, then you have us. And so, and then you have the people, no, Generation Z is behind us. So then you have Gen Xers, and then you have millennials. And so it's interesting that my core audience really is around my age group, but I am really trying to be more vocal towards those who are older. And it really is me basically saying, hear us, see us, we have something to contribute to these conversations, or we need to have these conversations. And the reason why we need to have these conversations is because clearly there has not been a lot of progress that has happened during this time. That and so my goal has always been to build a bridge, to try to build a bridge between me and then those older than us, for them to kind of like be like, all right, let's come together, let's come to the table, because there's so much that we can still accomplish together. But we need to have this idea of togetherness put, in a way to where somebody has to be the bridge. And so, yeah, I would say that my core audience is really for, I would love to target the older generation, but my core audience is really us. It's the younger millennials, it's the older millennials, it's the people that are right around in my age, and I enjoy that. I enjoy having conversation with my peers. And it always has been a situation where I just wanted to be seen. And so being able to use my writing in a way for me to be able to be seen has been so beneficial. And so, yeah, I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we try to exclude people, because I realize that some of my content is not for anybody. If you're younger than a teenager, you really shouldn't be listening to some of my content, because I'm just gonna be honest. I just had a podcast episode a couple weeks ago that was talking about, you know, the times that I was entangled, and I was talking about some real adult stuff. And so when I have these conversations, I know that the baby boomers are kind of, some of them are like hush hush about things. So I really am kind of like mixing it in with my peers, because I know that they get it. Especially, I feel like for us as millennials, we kind of are the balancing beam. Or, you know, when you have the law scales, we kind of like balance out the scales, because we are the last generation that knows what it's like to live without technology. But then we are the beginning of the generation who knows how technology can be useful and where it can carry us. So we're right there in the middle. We're the people that, you know, the older people rely on, and we're the people that the younger people are looking up to, but also so getting older enough to where they're calling us corny. Because, oh my goodness, my nephews are starting to make me feel so much older. My oldest nephew is about to be 17 years old, and I'm like, wow, where did the time go? And so, yeah, I would say, if that answers your question, that really is my core audience, because yeah, my podcast, as I say sometimes, can get real ratchet. But then it can also be super spiritual, and so I think I'm a mixture of that, of you know, the hood side, yeah. Right, the classic, the sophisticated ratchet. I'm a mixture of those things. That's what Angela Rye calls it, sophisticated ratchet. I'm a mixture of both of those things. Well educated, but still low key. I'm from the hood. I'm from East St. Louis, so it's like, as Toby would say, try Jesus, not me. Okay.
Come on.
Because look,
she will lay hands on you as a minister.
Okay, and sometimes they may not be holy, amen. So, especially when it comes to like people I care about, so we have to be careful, because it's like I can show up, and it depends on who you want. Do you want the loving breed, or do you want the breed that might turn up on you? So you got to be careful.
Come on.
And I'm fully honest and authentic about me. Okay.
Amen. Amen. That's beautiful. You actually just mentioned a few moments ago, East St. Louis, Illinois, stressing the Illinois. So about growing up in our hometown, our city of champions. What was that like for you?
Yes, girl. Emphasis, stressing on the Illinois part, because people forget there is a whole river, a whole Mississippi River that separates us between Missouri and Illinois. So I am from, a whole. So I am from East St. Louis, Illinois, and growing up in the city of champions is so beneficial, and it was so great for me, because I feel like growing up in East St. Louis taught me how to be resilient. It taught me how to pivot. It taught me how to be beneficial in a way, or be resourceful in a way that you wouldn't really necessarily get if you grew up in a place where you had all resources available to you. And a lot of times that the city of champions is always associated with athletes. And for me, I like for it to be associated with me as an academic. And so I consider myself a champion. I am a champion for education. Although I'm not a teacher, in many ways I do teach. And in many ways I do, I love to learn. I value education, because that was a pillar in my life. That was one of the pillars that my grandmother put in place, is for us to value our education. She didn't necessarily stress that we couldn't have those outside activities, because I want to say that I was also a dancer. But when, you know, at Eastside, where I went to high school, dancing wasn't necessarily considered a sport. It was just considered something that we kind of like did for fun. And so, although dancing does have a certain level of athleticism that's attached to it. As a person that is a champion, I'm championing for literacy. I'm championing for education. I'm championing for, inclusivity. I'm championing for those different things. And so I think growing up, it really shaped how I really looked at the world, how I looked at the outside world. Because oftentimes you think it can be a hindrance to some. But for me, because my grandmother always told people, I knew, like in the book, I have a chapter, I think it's chapter 2, where I say I'm poor and aware. I was fully aware of poverty, fully aware of the poverty that, that I grew up in. However, my grandmother never allowed us to look at that thing of poverty and make us think that because we grew up that way, that was supposed to be a hindrance to us. I grew up in a house where I didn't have those type of limitations put on my mind or those restraints put on me. And I'm fully aware that I have friends who kind of grew up that way, where they felt like because they grew up or people have taught them because they grew up in the hood, that they can only strive and push forward to a certain level. And for me, we didn't have those limitations. My grandmother told me that we could be whatever, do whatever. My father also, I had a recent conversation with him, and it's amazing to see how much my dad, how highly he thinks of me. Because our relationship now, because if you read the book or if you plan to read the book, you will see like how our relationship dynamic goes through ebbs and flows. And our relationship now is great. And so it's so amazing to see how highly my father thinks of me. And because I've talked to my dad recently. He was like, you could be the president if you wanted to. I don't know. Personally, I don't want that job. But I was like, for you to think that I'm better, that I'm good enough to hold the highest office in this land, I think that that's amazing. And so and it also shows me that the thought that you have of me, the abilities that you believe that I possess, to be able to think that I can do those types of things. So yeah, for me, I think East St. Louis trained me to be a hustler in many ways, but a legal hustler. Let me put that out there. So to be a hustler in a way where I don't take no for an answer, where even if you decide to give me a no, I know how to pivot comes back up again, or I know how to figure out a way. If you won't do it for me, then guess what? I may open up the door for myself to get it done. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's such a wonderful thing that I don't think a lot of people who didn't really grow up in poverty get to have that aspect. You don't have that hunger. You don't have that thirsting. Some people don't have that hunger or thirsting down on the inside of them to strive, to be better, to do better. And so I think that it was very beneficial growing up for me here in East St. Louis. Yeah, and it's so nostalgic to have this moment, like to do this from home.
From home. You talked about being an academic, and mostly East St. Louis is known for the athleticism aspect of it, but it's also known for, high crime, poverty rates, etc. It just reminded me when you were talking, when I was about to graduate high school, I had this conversation with some older people. And it was actually for a scholarship, and they were like, okay, well, you have to understand, Jamie, that bad news sells. So I know you're tired of watching the news, and every news clipping, every headline about East St. Louis is about a murder or whatever. And I just looked at them, and I was 17 years old, Bree. I was 17 years old, and I looked at them and I said, well, good news builds a community. And it was Jesus. It was Jesus. Okay. And that's how Shining Light Media started. That's how it started, because I was just so tired of the same narrative. And you talked about this in your podcast, the same narrative being preached. Yes, we are not trying to deny or cover up that there are some negative things that happen in our community, as it does in other communities. But we also want you to know who we are and not what happens in our community. Who are the community members? And so there are people who, like you, who are lifestyle bloggers and working in government and musicians and athletes and doctors. Like, Joya Anthony, just to name drop, recently got
Mm-hmm.
married, but she's a whole chief resident right now. Like she's a resident
Okay.
where she
And
is.
Joya graduated with me. She's from my class.
Kiara Johnson, working in Jefferson City, Missouri, like all these people I can name drop, Danielle Carradine, like Akeem Muhammad, Omar
Yes.
Ali, like all these people, Deshaun, I hate to keep going because I can just name a whole bunch of people that we both
Yeah, me
graduated with,
too.
but
And
just
then,
in
some
our
of
age,
these,
Daryl Williams, like in our age group, like we are so far and people don't know that. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited. Everybody's like,
no, go ahead, girl. Talk
this,
your
right?
talk. Talk your talk.
It's just we know people, and there are so many others. So please forgive me if I didn't mention your name. It's just the people that I've been in communication with and just come top of mind at the moment. But there are just so many others that we grew up with, that came before us, came after us, who are doing incredible things in different arenas. So we're not knocking
Yeah.
the athletes,
I
but
can
we are
mention
also
some
saying,
for you if
yeah,
you wanted to add some more. I can mention Esther Helfler with her professional photography and makeup business. Denise Chisholm with her makeup business and her hair business. Nicole Travis, she is all of these are entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs from East St. Louis that are thriving in their own, powerful Black women that are thriving right now in their own business. I can talk about, once again, you mentioned Daryl Williams, who is my cousin. He's nobody can out rap him, period. And then
he puts on
Duke
for the city.
Liddell. Yes, he puts on for the city. Duke Liddell, he has his own fashion brand that's specifically that's rooted in East St. Louis culture. Then you have to talk about like celebrities that we know, like Tom Joyner, like Jackie Joyner Kersey, Don Harper. Those people came from East St. Louis. If you need a white person, Steve Nash, I believe that's his name. He came from East St. Louis. No, Chuck Norris. Sorry, you all. Chuck Norris is the East St. Louis. Not Steve Nash. I know who he is. He's an East St. Louis native too. But Chuck Norris, he's an East St. Louis native. All of these different people, they come from this city. Do you know Tina Turner and Ike Turner used to live in our city? Miles Davis is from our city. So it's amazing to me. Lloyd Nix, he just got his single put on the radio, 99.1. So there's so many different people that are from East St. Louis that are thriving in all of these different age groups, all of these different things that they're doing. My grandmother, Dr. Edna Letha Long, let me put some emphasis on that because she's a doctor.
Some respect on that title.
Put some respect on her name. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many different people that are out there. Smiles Media. We have media outlets out here. Smiles TV. So there's people, and they're based in East St. Louis. And they've been thriving for years. And so I'm with you. I agree. And I've always been that type of person. It's like, no, what you won't do is talk about my city. I proudly proclaim, my hometown. And if I have a few moments, I will emphasize to you that it's in Illinois and it's not in St. Louis. So I love the fact that we are a group of people that are changing the narrative. We're changing people's understanding. And that's my purpose. Every time, every level that I enter, every level that I go up, every time I level up, I make sure that I mention I am from East St. Louis, Illinois. And my grandmother calls it and I call it too, the beautiful, anointed, and delivered city of East St. Louis, Illinois. We make it our business to not perpetrate the negative stereotypes that so often even people who've never stepped foot in this city try to perpetrate. And so I make it my business not to do that, because my city is very beautiful and has produced so many great things over the years. So it's yes, I'm with you, but we could stay there all day just talking about that.
Let's transition, because this is actually a good segue, because when we think of the word home, East St. Louis is home. But in your book, in your memoir, you talk a lot about not feeling like you were at home. I'm thinking of The Wiz right now, when she was singing Home. But you didn't feel like you were at home, that you felt homeless for a particular time period in your life. So can you talk to us a little bit about experiencing homelessness or being unhoused, or at least having some stability in that arena?
Absolutely. So, I think I start the book off right now. It's escaping me and I didn't bring my copy, but I started off saying that I grew up like I was a military child, but without the military. And what I meant by that, and what I talk about this idea of being a nomadic and being a nomad and not having a particular place to call home, is because as a child, particularly when I lived a lot with my mom, we really didn't have a lot of stability in regards to where we stayed and where we lived. I didn't find more stability until I was living, more permanently with my grandmother. So, I would have some years where I would stay with my mom. I would have some years where I stayed with my grandmother. And but I've always been in this constant rotational circle of not really being able to stay in one place, one solitary space. So even right now, while I live in Virginia, and I've been living there for about almost 3 years, I'm kind of itching to be like, okay, I'm ready to move. I'm ready to go, because I never known what it means to live in a solitary space, in a solitary place for your entire life. People who have that option, people don't really think about that being a privilege, but it is a privilege to be able to say that you grew up in a house and you stayed in that same house for your entire growing up lifestyle. You're still able to go back to that house, and that's your family's house, and you have those and that's where your parents have lived. They built that house. You have a history with it. I have a history with many places. So not only even though East St. Louis is what I consider my hometown, I lived in the surrounding areas. I lived in Belleville. I lived in Fairview Heights. I've lived in all of the different surrounding areas. I've moved out the state and lived in Pennsylvania for a year. Then I came back to East St. Louis. Then I moved from East St. Louis again. So now I'm based in Northern Virginia. I went to several different schools, several different districts. So I have private school, and then I also went to public school. I have all of these different things that kind of just didn't really necessarily provide what you would consider a stability, where most people would consider a normal, traditional stability. I didn't necessarily have those things. And with homelessness, I had a unique situation in where I physically grew up inside of a church. And I know a lot of people are like, what? Like, what? No, did she say what? Yeah, I physically grew up inside, raised in the church, physically inside of a church building. And it like, once again, that nostalgia comes in, because I'm physically sitting, clearly there's a pulpit behind me. I'm physically sitting right now recording inside of that same building where I spent a big chunk of my childhood. And so, we were, by the definition, the U.S. definition of homelessness, we were homeless. We didn't have a place that was there was an actual house that we could stay. We lived in the back of the church on Sundays, and back then on Sundays and Wednesdays, now on Sundays and Thursdays. It was a place of worship where people came in to get the word, to hear the word of God, and to fellowship and communicate with each other. But from Sunday to Sunday, it was a place where I laid my head, where I left to go to school, where I ate my breakfast, where I did all of these different things. And so I didn't have those luxuries that some people might have, because I call them luxuries. So I didn't have the luxury of having a shower. I didn't have the luxury of having like cable television or having internet. We were behind the curve when it came to those things. And so I kind of know what it means to kind of be a part of, and even now still kind of sort of be a part of that digital divide, that 13% of people who don't have access. I feel for them, because I know what it's like to not have that. I just got Wi-Fi in my apartment in Northern Virginia for the first time, and I've been living there for almost 3 years. But that's a luxury, because that's an extra expense, and everybody can't afford that. And there were things like that we couldn't necessarily afford when I was growing up. But my grandmother made it happen. She made it do what it do. I came up in the age of dial-up, and then try coming up in the age of dial-up living in a brick building. Do you know how hard it was to connect to the internet in a brick building?
Page is loading for half an hour.
Page loading for a half an hour. Then let somebody pick up the phone. It's messed up. Your life is over. Or you be on the internet for 15 minutes, and then grandma like, hey, I gotta call someone. So you have to get off after you done waited almost an hour for the internet to kick in. So it's like those types of things like that are luxury items. And so, I've learned how not to necessarily attach myself to material things. And as I mentioned earlier in our Facebook Live, I think the only thing that I've ever attached myself to is physically is books. Books have always become a safe space or been a safe space for me. I always have I remember literally laying on the floor for hours. That was my entertainment, with my nose in a book, laying on a cold, hard concrete floor with carpeted concrete floor in the middle of the floor, reading a book. And that was my entertainment. So that's probably I know that's part of the reason why I'm a librarian now. I'm a Black librarian, which also is kind of a minority type thing, but it's just like, I have a habit of going after things that I, want to kind of like bust the doors wide open. So I guess be a disruptor in that way, and, stay tuned for that. But yes, so it like growing up in like a semi-homeless space, because we didn't have a home or a house per se, but we did have a roof over our heads. We did have food on our tables for most of that time. There we were able to kind of survive and go through that. And then my elementary school and my middle school was right up the street. So some days we would walk to school, because my grandmother didn't even have, for a long period of time, my grandmother didn't have a vehicle. She didn't have a car. So we had to do what we had to do. And I thank God that God always provided, and we always had people around us that was able to do what they needed to do to take care of us. And that's my grandmother's faith is so strong. Like, it was, she needed always showed up. And I was just like, and I'm like, ooh, God, how? And so that really comes by walking with him. And she walked heavily with the Lord. And she was able to raise multiple generations of children, and still raising multiple generations of children. Because newsflash, just because we grown by age don't mean we grown. She's still parenting. She's still parenting. I mentioned on the back, the book description, my grandmother is still my emergency contact. I'm about to be a whole 30 years old, and my grandmother is still my emergency contact. And I'm okay with that. I am perfectly okay with that, because I know guess who's going to pick up the phone, or guess who's going to come find out what's going on with me, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. She's going to figure it out. I remember she made the joke one day that she's like, if I got to fly on a mosquito to come see what's going on with you, I'm coming. A mess. She cracked me up. But yeah, it was just like,
well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your grandma, because you've been mentioning her throughout this whole conversation. Talk to me about your three parents. What that means to you, because you just had a podcast episode come out about your three parents. What that means to you, what that means, and tell us about the dynamics growing up.
Absolutely. So yes, I have three parents. I have three pillars, three foundational pillars in my life that mean a lot to me. So I have my of course my biological father, my biological mother, and then I have my grandma, which is my dad's mother. And so I have two. I have my granny, who's my mom's mom, and then my grandmother, who's my dad's mom. So I just want to make that differentiation. So if I'm talking about one person, you'll know who I'm talking about, then you know who I'm talking about the other. So grandma is my dad's mom, and then granny is my mom's mom. But these three, I would say, are the foundational pillars, and these three parents that I have. So my grandmother is who I consider my primary parent. And the reason why I consider her my primary parent is because she is the one that has done most of the rearing, most of the raising, and most of the child rearing and the raising and the nurturing that I needed to kind of like show up as a functioning person in society. So she's the one that did all of that. And a lot of that happens often in the Black community, where traditionally in the Black community, normally for most of the people that I've known, a lot of people that I know, their grandparents kind of raised them more. I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but maybe it is for us, where the elders in the community have a strong influence on the rearing of the child. And so for me, my grandmother, however, was the stability. She was the one that raised us, that kept us from having to deal with any of the drama or the dysfunction that may have been going on between my parents, because my parents got divorced when I was 5. And so we don't often talk about, the trauma that comes from, parents divorcing and kids having to go through that. But my grandmother did a really good job of shielding us from that. So because I can't even tell you, I didn't know what really went on with my parents' divorce proceedings until I read their divorce papers. So for a large chunk of my life, no idea. So my grandmother did a really good job of shielding us from that. But she is the primary parent. She is really the foundation of the other 2 pillars. And so with my father and my mother, they parent me, but they also concede or to my grandmother. They like, what did she say though? She's the matriarch. So it's like, okay, yeah, we'll give you our permission. But then what did your grandmother say about it? And if your grandma says that it's okay, then of course, then it's okay. But the beautiful thing about coming up in this triangle, that although this triangle had some hiccups and some hangups, my grandmother she never took away the opportunity or never not left room for them to be parents. So she did not fill their seats. She let them sit in their own chairs, if that makes sense. So she allowed my parents to parent. Because, oftentimes what you get to a situation. Now, there were some times when she protected us from our parents, but then there were also times where she was like, I'm still going to allow you to be in their life. Because, you have a lot of situations that happen where you often see where the person, whoever the primary parent is, they consider themselves protecting the child, or so they might mess around and, that relationship can be broken between them and their actual biological parents because, in your means of protecting, you're actually shielding them from building a relationship with those individuals. My grandmother never did that. She never blocked the ability for me to have a relationship with my parents. She allowed them, however, to figure out how they were going to cultivate that relationship, whatever way that they decided to do it. And so what she would do, though, is that she would take, like when my parents were around, she would take the back seat. And she never, she's still very confident in her position and in her ability, but she would take the back seat and allow them to do whatever it is that they needed to do when she wanted them or needed them to step up. And sometimes they did. When they couldn't step up, she took over. But she never took that opportunity from them. And I'm very appreciative of that, because that kind of like does change the trajectory of my life and how my life kind of flows. And you will see how that goes kind of throughout the book. You'll see those different dynamics of how I dealt with each parent individually, as well as dealing with my grandmother. Because I'll be honest and say there was a point in my life where I did not like either one of my parents. I still love them, but I didn't like them as people. And, we do that often. But my grandmother, I remember, and I don't think I share this moment in the book, but I remember a time where I physically said out of my mouth, I hate my father, right? Mind you, said that to my grandmother, who that is her child. So you got to be careful, first off. But then also I physically said that, but my grandmother always allowed us to be vocal and have our feelings or have moments. So even as I was growing and in those times when I became an adult where I kind of was closed off and didn't have, I wasn't speaking as much or whatever, because, in the Black community, we often have that children are to be seen and not heard situation. And that shut me down for a long time. But my grandmother, when I said that to her, she was like, don't you ever say that, ever say that again, because that's, hate is a powerful word. And when you're a Christian, you have to be very mindful of the things that are coming out of your mouth. And so she was like, don't ever say that again. And she was like, no, you don't hate your father. Yeah, you might dislike what's happening right now and you don't appreciate because your expectations may have not gotten met in this moment, but you don't hate your father, and she really made me think about what I was saying, because no, I didn't hate my dad, but I disliked what was happening and what I was having or what was happening in our relationship in that moment. And so I would say that, you know, when we get ready to go off on the deep end, or on those moments when I did try to go off or did go off on the deep end, she did a good job of reeling me back in and bringing me back into reality. And, you know, helping me to see my parents as people and as humans who made mistakes. They did things. I think I appreciate and I understand my parents more now than I've ever understood them. Now being the age that I am, I said, oh, I see, you know, what you all were dealing with at this age. Because my parents had me young. They married young. They had me when they were like 20 and 21 years old. That was young. You're still, and I remember who I was at 20 and 21. I wasn't bit more ready for no kids. So it's just like, yeah, to now is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful feeling. So yeah, my triangle is very I guess I would say stronger now. And you often will see those different personalities show up though. Because my grandmother gave me Jesus. She cultivated the word in me. So you'll get the saved side of me. You'll get that. And it's not to say that my parents don't have, you know, salvation or whatever. They know God. They got saved when they were younger. They made, you know, their relationship with God is whatever it is at this moment for them. But my grandmother is what gave me the spiritual foundation. She's the one that kind of laid a solid foundation for me in the word and kind of helped to give me that to kind of ground me. My dad is the one that kind of helped me with that to go cultivate the hustling mindset that I kind of have to try to my drive to keep going, to keep pushing forward. Because my father, I ain't never met someone that he just attracts jobs to him. He has the ability. And I'm like, maybe did I miss out on that gene or whatever? Because I'm like, Lord, I need you to send that down, the attraction, the jobs to me. But my father, he's a very lovable man. He's a very kind guy. He can come into a room and make friends. He's that person. And then my mom is very sweet, but and my mom's not a dog, but we often equate her to, you know, how little Chihuahua dogs are. My mom is a short, petite woman, and she's fiery. And you ain't gonna play with her. Like she is. My mom might be 5'1", but I'm telling you, she's a giant. In her mind, I think she's 6. I think she thinks she's 6'7", and you ain't gonna tell her what to do. You ain't gonna stop her from doing what she's gonna do. And they're both of my parents are very much so business oriented. All of my parents are very much so business oriented. They have those entrepreneurial spirits. But my mom is like, she's the one that, you know, when I tell you that the 0 to 100, that's that side. That's the defender. She's very loving, but she's very protective. And so that's kind of where that comes from. And all of them are protective, but I think with my mom is even more of she's very, very, very protective about the people that she loves. And like, she's the one that if it needs to be handled, it's going to get handled. You know what I'm saying?
Real life.
And so, yeah, real life about that life. Okay. And all three of those people are kind of down on the inside of me, and they kind of mesh well together every day.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.